Wife leaves me and my daughter for a rich guy. 6 years later, karma hits and she calls back because she is homeless and wants to get back. I'm a 32-year-old man living with my 6-year-old daughter, Rosie. We've been on our own for the past 3 years since my wife, Cassie, left us. It's been challenging at times, but Rosie and I have managed to build a good life together. Rosie is the light of my life. She's a bright, curious kid who loves to read and draw. Every evening after work, we have our special daddy-daughter time where we read stories together or play board games. On weekends, we often go to the park or have picnics. I've worked hard to create a stable, loving home for her. I work from home as a software developer, which allows me to be there for Rosie before and after school. We have a good routine going. I drop her off at school in the mornings, work during the day, then pick her up in the afternoons. We have dinner together every night and I help her with homework. It's not always easy being a single parent, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Rosie and I have our little traditions that make our days special. Every Monday, we have pancake night, where we make funny-shaped pancakes for dinner. On Fridays, we have a movie night with popcorn and blanket forts. These small things have helped us bond and create a sense of normalcy after Cassie left. I've also made sure to surround Rosie with positive female role models. My sister comes over often to spend time with her, and Rosie has a great relationship with her teacher at school. I want her to have strong women in her life, even if her mother isn't around. Yesterday, while I was working, I got an unexpected phone call. It was Cassie. I was shocked to hear from her after all this time. She said she wanted to talk and asked if we could meet up. I was hesitant, but agreed to hear her out. Cassie told me she wants to come back home and be a family again. She said she's made a huge mistake in leaving us and deeply regrets it. When I asked why she suddenly wanted to return after 3 years of no contact, she admitted that she's currently homeless and living in a shelter. She said she has nowhere else to go and wants another chance with us. I was shocked and conflicted. On one hand, Cassie is Rosie's mother, and I know Rosie misses having a mom around sometimes. But on the other hand, Cassie abandoned us without a second thought and hasn't been in touch at all for 3 years. I don't know if I can trust her not to leave again. I told Cassie I needed time to think about it and process everything. She seemed desperate and pleaded with me to let her come home, but I stood firm on needing time. I said I'd get back to her in a few days after I've had a chance to consider things. Now, I'm torn about what to do. Part of me feels like I should give Cassie another chance for Rosie's sake, but another part feels like Cassie only wants to come back because she has nowhere else to go, not because she genuinely wants to be with us. I'm worried about disrupting the stable life Rosie and I have built. I haven't told Rosie about any of this yet. I don't want to get her hopes up in case I decide not to let Cassie come back. Rosie occasionally asks about her mom, but she's adjusted well to our life together and seems happy overall. I know Cassie is in a desperate situation, but I also need to protect myself and Rosie emotionally. I'm not sure I can ever fully trust Cassie again after she abandoned us. At the same time, I feel guilty about potentially turning away Rosie's mother when she needs help. I've worked hard to build a good life for Rosie and myself after Cassie left. I got promoted at work, which allowed me to buy a small house in a nice neighborhood with good schools. We have a little garden where we grow vegetables together. Rosie has made friends in the neighborhood and is thriving at school. I'm worried that bringing Cassie back into our lives could disrupt all of this. But I also remember how devastated Rosie was when Cassie first left. She cried for her mom every night for weeks. It took months of therapy and lots of love and patience to help her adjust. Part of me wonders if having her mom back could heal some of those old wounds for Rosie. Then again, what if Cassie leaves again? I don't think Rosie could handle another abandonment, and I'm not sure I could either. The pain of Cassie leaving was almost unbearable the first time. I'm not sure I'm strong enough to go through that again. I've thought about setting some conditions if I do let Cassie come back. Maybe she could stay with us temporarily while she gets back. On her feet, but not move in permanently right away. Or maybe she could start with supervised visits with Rosie before we consider anything more. But I'm not sure if that's fair to anyone involved. I've also considered offering Cassie financial help to get set up in her own place, without moving back in with us. But I worry that might give her false hope about reconciling, or that she might take advantage of my generosity. This situation has brought up so many complicated emotions: anger at Cassie for abandoning us, pity for her current situation, fear of disrupting Rosie's life, guilt over potentially turning away someone in need, hope that maybe we could be a family again, distrust based on past betrayal. So Reddit, should I give her another chance, or protect the life Rosie and I have built? I could really use some outside perspectives on this situation. How do I balance doing what's best for Rosie with protecting ourselves emotionally? Is there a middle ground I'm not seeing? Any advice would be appreciated as I try to navigate this difficult decision. Update 1. Thank you all for your responses to my original post. I've spent the last couple of days thinking things over and trying to decide what to do about Cassie's request to come back. I still haven't made up my mind. This whole situation has brought up a lot of old memories and feelings that I thought I'd put behind me. I've found myself reflecting on my history with Cassie and how we got to this point. Cassie and I met through an arranged marriage set up by our families. I was 25 and she was 23 at the time. Neither of us had dated much before, so we were both nervous but hopeful about building a life together. Our families were close friends and thought we'd be a good match. I remember feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety on our wedding day. Cassie looked beautiful in her white dress, and I felt proud to be standing next to her. Our families were beaming with joy as we said our vows. We both promised to love and support each other through good times and bad. The first year of our marriage was actually pretty good. We were getting to know each other, figuring out how to live together, and generally enjoying married life. We had some normal newlywed disagreements, but overall things were positive. We'd have long talks about our hopes and dreams for the future. We'd go on weekend trips to explore nearby cities. We even started talking about having kids. About a year after we got married, Rosie was born. We were thrilled to become parents, and those first few months with our new baby were some of the happiest of my life. I remember holding Rosie for the first time in the hospital, feeling overwhelmed with love. Cassie seemed to take to motherhood well, and I loved being a dad. But then things started to go downhill. When Rosie was about 6 months old, I unexpectedly lost my job. The company I worked for went through major layoffs and my whole department was cut. I tried hard to find a new job, but the job market was tough at that time. I was unemployed for several months, and we started to struggle financially. Cassie was working as an administrative assistant, so we had some income. But it wasn't enough to comfortably support our family of 3. We had to dip into our savings and cut back on a lot of expenses. We couldn't afford date nights or trips anymore. We were constantly stressed about money. The financial stress started to take a toll on our relationship. Cassie became more and more bitter about the situation. She'd make cutting remarks about me not contributing financially. I was already feeling horrible about being unemployed, and her comments just made me feel worse. I was applying to jobs constantly and doing some freelance work when I could find it, but it wasn't enough in Cassie's eyes. I remember one particularly bad fight where Cassie screamed at me that I was a failure as a husband and father. She said she was tired of carrying the whole family on her shoulders. I tried to explain how hard I was trying to find work, but she wouldn't listen. She stormed out and didn't come home until late that night. What I didn't know at the time was that Cassie had started cheating on me with a wealthy businessman she met through her job. I was so focused on trying to find work and take care of Rosie that I was oblivious to the signs. Cassie would work late or go out with friends, and I never suspected anything. Looking back, there were red flags I should have noticed. Cassie started dressing up more for work and wearing more makeup. She was constantly texting and would hide her phone screen from me. She became very protective of her privacy, but I was too caught up in my own stress to see what was happening. This went on for about 2 years. I eventually found a new full-time job, but by then, the damage to our marriage was done. Cassie had become cold and distant. We fought constantly about money and other issues. I tried to salvage things, suggesting counseling and date nights, but Cassie wasn't interested. I remember one night, I tried to talk to Cassie about how we could improve our relationship. I suggested we try to reconnect. Maybe plan a weekend away, just the 2 of us. Cassie just laughed bitterly and said it was too late for that. I didn't understand what she meant at the time. Then one day, shortly after Rosie's 3rd birthday, I came home from work to find Cassie gone. She'd packed up her things and left a note saying she was leaving me for another man. I was blindsided and devastated. The note was brief and cold. It said she'd found someone who could give her the life she deserved. She said she wasn't happy with me anymore and didn't want to pretend. She wrote that she knew I'd take good care of Rosie and that it was better this way. There was no apology, no explanation of where she was going. I remember sinking to the floor and sobbing as I read the note over and over. I couldn't believe Cassie could just walk away from our family like that. I felt like my whole world had been shattered. The next few months were a blur of pain and confusion. I was heartbroken and struggling to understand how Cassie could just abandon our family like that. I had to figure out how to be a single dad while dealing with my own emotional turmoil. My parents helped out a lot during that time, watching Rosie when I needed to work. Explaining to Rosie why her mommy was gone was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. She would cry and ask when mommy was coming home. It broke my heart to see her so confused and hurt. We went through divorce proceedings, and it was finalized about 6 months after Cassie left. She didn't fight me for custody of Rosie at all. In fact, she made it clear she didn't want any parental responsibilities. That hurt almost as much as the abandonment, knowing she could so easily walk away from our child. My family tried to talk to Cassie's family about the situation, but they completely took her side. They blamed me for driving her away by losing my job and claimed I must have been a terrible husband. It was clear they were going to support whatever story Cassie told them. I later found out that Cassie had told her family I was emotionally abusive and that she had to leave for her own safety. It was a complete lie, but they believed her without question. They cut off all contact with me and Rosie, and that brings us to the present situation. It's been 3 years since Cassie left, and now she wants to come back because she has nowhere else to go. Part of me still cares for her and hates the thought of her being homeless, but a bigger part of me is angry and mistrustful after everything that's happened. I've decided I need to talk to Cassie face to face before I make any decisions. I want to hear exactly what happened with the man she left us for and why she thinks she deserves another chance now. I called her earlier today, and we've arranged to meet at a cafe tomorrow afternoon to talk things over. I'm nervous about the meeting and unsure what to expect. I don't know if I'll get honest answers from Cassie or if she'll try to manipulate me, but I feel like I need more information before I can decide whether to let her back into our lives or not. I'll update again after I've met with Cassie. Thanks again to everyone who's offered advice and support. It really helps to have outside perspectives on this complicated situation. Update 2. I met with Cassie at a cafe as planned. I chose a place far from our neighborhood, so there was no chance of Rosie seeing us together. I didn't want to get her hopes up or confuse her until I'd made a final decision. When Cassie arrived, I was shocked by her appearance. She looked thin and tired, with dark circles under her eyes. Her clothes were worn and she seemed jumpy and nervous. It was a stark contrast to the polished, confident woman who'd left us 3 years ago. We got coffee and found a quiet table in the corner to talk. Cassie launched into her story right away. She told me about her relationship with the wealthy man she'd left us for, who I'll call John. Apparently, John had pursued Cassie aggressively when they first met. He showered her with expensive gifts and took her to fancy restaurants. He promised her a life of luxury if she left me for him. Cassie admitted she was seduced by the idea of never having to worry about money again. When she first moved in with John, things were good. He bought her designer clothes, took her on exotic vacations, and treated her like a princess. Cassie said she convinced herself she was in love and that she'd made the right choice in leaving us. But over time, John's true nature started to show. He was controlling and had a volatile temper. He monitored Cassie's phone and limited her contact with friends and family. He expected her to always look perfect and accompany him to business events, but got angry if other men paid attention to her. Cassie said she started to realize John saw her more as a trophy than a partner. He wasn't interested in her thoughts or feelings. When she tried to talk about missing Rosie, he'd dismiss her concerns and say she was better off without the burden of a child. Things came to a head about 6 months ago. John met a young model at a party and became infatuated with her. Within weeks, he told Cassie he was leaving her for this new woman. He kicked Cassie out of his house with barely any notice. Cassie had no job and little savings of her own. Everything had been in John's name. She couch-surfed with acquaintances for a while, but eventually ran out of options. For the past 2 months, she's been staying at a women's shelter. She described the shelter as crowded and depressing. She has to share a room with 3 other women, and there's little privacy. The food is basic, and there are strict rules about when residents can come and go. Cassie said she feels unsafe there and is desperate to leave. As Cassie told her story, she broke down crying several times. She said she deeply regrets leaving us and knows she made a huge mistake. She apologized over and over for abandoning Rosie and begged me to give her another chance. I listened to everything Cassie had to say, but I felt myself getting angry. It was clear to me that she was only coming back now because she had nowhere else to go. If John hadn't dumped her, she never would have contacted us again. I told Cassie that while I'm sorry for what she's been through, I can't welcome her back into our home or our lives. I explained that there's no guarantee she wouldn't leave again if another opportunity came along. I'm not willing to risk Rosie or myself getting hurt like that again. I reminded Cassie that she walked away from Rosie without a second thought. She never called, never sent birthday cards, never asked how Rosie was doing. I told her that Rosie and I have built a good life together, and I'm not going to disrupt that. Cassie became hysterical at this point. She sobbed and pleaded, saying she'd do anything for another chance. She said she had no one else to turn to and didn't know what she'd do if I turned her away. It was hard, but I stood firm. I told Cassie that her actions have consequences and she needs to figure out how to get back on her feet on her own. I said I'd be willing to help her find resources for job training or housing assistance, but I couldn't take her back into our family. I left the cafe feeling drained, but certain I'd made the right choice. On the drive home, I thought about how to approach things with Rosie. I decided to be honest with her in an age-appropriate way. I'll explain that I saw her mom, but that her mom still isn't able to be part of our family right now. I'll reassure Rosie that it's not her fault and that I'll always be there for her. It's been a roller coaster of emotions dealing with this situation. Part of me will always care about Cassie, but I know I can't trust her again. My priority has to be protecting Rosie and the stable life we've created together. I plan to reach out to a family therapist to help us navigate this situation. I want to make sure Rosie has the support she needs to process her feelings about her mom. Thank you to everyone who's followed this story and offered advice. Your support has meant a lot as I've navigated this difficult situation. I'm looking forward to moving on and focusing on raising Rosie to be a strong, happy person, despite the challenges we've faced.